Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you are watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Around 30 world leaders meet Ukrainian President Zelensky to discuss security guarantees if a ceasefire with Russia is reached. The coalition of the willing includes European nations, Turkey, Australia and Canada as they seek to win US support. Hamas says it is ready for a comprehensive deal to free all Israeli hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners, shortly after President Trump demands the release of 20 captives. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejects the offer as empty spin and repeats that the Gaza war will end only with Hamas disarmed, the Strip demilitarized, and Israeli controlled. Chinese President Xi Jinping and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un will hold in-depth talks on bilateral ties and strategic issues, Beijing has announced. China says the meeting will be of significant importance as both sides pledge closer cooperation and stronger socialist partnerships. China defends its decision to invite Russia and North Korea to its World War II commemorations in Beijing after President Trump accuses them of conspiring against the United States. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Guo Jiakun insists China's diplomacy is never directed against any third party. Rescuers in Afghanistan struggle to pull bodies from rubble after powerful earthquakes leave more than 1,400 dead and tens of thousands displaced. Aid agencies warn funding cuts and Taliban policies are making it harder to deliver food, shelter and medical care. The Trump administration asks the US Supreme Court to fast-track its appeal after a lower court rules against the president's tariffs. Solicitor General John Sauer warns that the delay is damaging trade talks and urges oral arguments by November. Portugal is in shock after 16 people die and 18 are injured when Lisbon's 140-year-old Gloria funicular derails a major tourist attraction in the capital. Officials declare a day of national mourning as the mayor calls it a tragic moment for the city. The Israeli military says Houthi rebels fire 3 missiles from Yemen in 24 hours, 2 intercepted and 1 landing outside Israel without any injuries. Defense Minister Israel Katz warns of a response of biblical proportions, declaring Israel will complete all 10 plagues. Now we start this hour in Europe, where Russia has rejected any discussion of foreign military deployment in Ukraine, calling the idea unacceptable and a threat to security. Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said Moscow will not enter talks on an international post-conflict force in any format. Her comments come as European leaders work on plans for a multinational force to provide security guarantees to Ukraine in the event of a peace accord. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Zelensky is scheduled to meet with European leaders in Paris to finalize details, with French President Emmanuel Macron saying the plans remain highly confidential. Moreover, US President Donald Trump is expected to speak with both leaders in the coming days. Russia continues to demand that any deal include territory it annexed since 2022, while Kiev refuses to ceding any land. We're now joined by Glenn Grant. He is an ex-advisor to the Ukrainian Defense Minister, and he joins us live from the Ukrainian capital. Glenn, more of the same. We have Russia's stance saying they are serious about peace talks. However, they have called foreign troop deployments in Ukraine unacceptable. From Kiev, how do you interpret Moscow's warning, Glenn?
Well, as you said, more of the same. It's quite clear that after or with Putin's trip to China and meeting the other leaders, that he obviously feels completely empowered now and supported to be able to keep this war going. And he's obviously going to do so. I hate to say this, but I think that the European leaders and maybe even Zelensky are they're doing what they're doing to basically to kowtow to Trump, to try and show Trump that they're doing something for peace. But it's flipping nonsense. It really is nonsense. Instead of spending their time worrying about something that isn't happening, they should spend their time about worrying about what is happening, which is massive attacks, massive drone attacks and missile attacks nightly, and a front line that is gradually creeping forward. And they seem to be ignoring both of those in any way other than just handing over money and a bit more equipment. This is not this is not a good move. I'm sorry.
Glenn, Germany has actually called talks of troop deployments premature. Does this expose real divisions in Europe on how far it will go in supporting Ukraine?
Oh, I think it does, and I mean I think the comment that Europe is as one is complete nonsense, because now we've got now you've got sort of leaders in Slovakia, Hungary, looking in Bulgaria, looking in one direction, and then you've got the weak-willed Europeans looking in another, Germany looking a different way altogether, and then the what you can call the frontline states. They know full well what the score is. They know exactly what Russia is up to, but then none of them are strong enough, either militarily or diplomatically, to be able to kick the weak ones into shape. And the weak ones: Great Britain, Spain, Italy, France, who all talk a lot, but the actual the doing that is important is missing.
Glenn, you're joining us from the Ukrainian capital. Since Donald Trump has assumed the presidency of the United States back in January, there has been an absolute roller coaster when it has come to diplomacy here. However, Russian attacks on Ukrainian territory continue to be a barrage. What is the feeling when it comes to the president and also the Europeans in negotiations? Is there hope there in the Ukrainian capital?
Um, the hope in the Ukrainian capital, there is, but it's all about we've got to do this on our own. Yes, they know that they'll get support from the Europeans. They say all support except help, and the same sort of thing from hopefully something from US. But there is disgust about the US actions. I mean, Trump's actions are just trying to make money out of people dying in Ukraine. It is seen as being totally and utterly disgusting. But beggars can't be choosers in this respect. The Ukrainians are stubborn. They're going to win, and they're going to keep attacking Russia in depth and keep attacking the energy supplies until something cracks in Russia. But it's going to take a lot of time, and a lot of people are going to die first because of Trump and European weakness.
Yes, and how are the people of Ukraine feeling now about how the war is going? Obviously, Russia are gaining territory, however, very, very slowly. They currently hold around 20% of the Ukrainian territory. Territorial concessions, obviously, Glenn, is central to these peace discussions, and so far we have not seen much budging when it comes to that on either side. What are the thoughts on how the war is going on the ground?
It's interesting because I mean there's great stubbornness. There's no question about that. Great stubbornness, and actually, the more people that Russia kills, the more stubbornness comes to the front. They're not going backwards and getting weaker and thinking we're going to lose this or we have to give up territory. In fact, it's becoming the other way around. They're becoming more and more determined to keep going. But there is a great unhappiness about the Zelensky government and its activities inside the country, not outside. Diplomatically, doing a great job, but inside the country, the management is weak, and it's become almost a standing joke now, that they simply they're known as the idiocracy, because they just can't get anything right, and most things are being done for public relations and election benefit, you might say. So it's a complex time in Ukraine, and there is, this combination of despair, anger, and stubbornness all at the same time. But I can tell you the city, Kiev, and Kharkiv, and Lviv, where I've just been, are all going about business as normal, and you would not know about the nightly attacks if you just walked around the cities in daytime.
Glenn, we are currently seeing this meeting of the coalition of the willing. They're arriving in Paris. President Volodymyr Zelensky will be there, along with Macron, along with Ursula von der Leyen, just to name a few of these 29 leaders that are about to show up in Paris as we anticipate for that. We also have some further breaking news coming in. That in response to Russia saying that potential military deployment in Ukraine is unacceptable, the NATO chief Mark Rutte has said that it is not for Russia to decide if the West can deploy troops to Ukraine. Glenn, of course, NATO, a central part of why Russia invaded Ukraine in the first place. The fear of Kiev joining the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Is there still hopes for that in Kiev? And how do the Ukrainians assess their friendship with that organization now?
Can I just jump back to your first bit, that NATO was nothing at all to do with this invasion of Ukraine? NATO's been there a long time. Russia has dealt with it. I just remind you that there are still Russians inside the NATO headquarters. So NATO's got absolutely zero to do with this. This is just words. And Rutte is right in that if we go for a peace agreement of some sort, then it's not Russia's right to actually to say what Ukraine does on its side to protect itself. But what Putin is saying is that, first of all, he's mocking the European leaders by his words. That's one thing. And secondly, he's saying that while you're doing this, we are not going to go for a peace agreement. And most Ukrainians fully understand this. It just seems that the European leaders are taking themselves down a path that they can understand and deal with and sell to their electorates, rather than actually facing up to the fact that we're all at war, and that actually, at the moment, you could say Russia has the upper hand.
Yes, Glenn, thank you very much for joining us. We do have one final update coming out of the conflict. The Ukrainian emergency crews in Odesa were seen battling flames engulfing buildings and vehicles following what local media described as a Russian drone attack. Footage released by the State Emergency Service showed firefighters rushing to put out intense blazes after reports of 4 explosions after a half-hour period late on Wednesday night. We will, of course, bring you all updates from the Ukraine and Russia conflict, and I want to thank my guest very much, Glenn Grant, for joining us here on the programme and taking the time out to speak to us. We now move over to the Indo-Pacific for our next story. Okay, we have live visuals coming in from that meeting in Paris. Volodymyr Zelensky there, accompanied by French President Emmanuel Macron, close allies, extremely close allies, a strong supporter of the Ukrainian cause, Emmanuel Macron, there to meet in Paris today with 29 other leaders, including Ursula von der Leyen, including Mette Frederiksen, including Donald Tusk, among many others, there to discuss those security guarantees for Ukraine if a peace deal is eventually reached. We will, of course, bring you all updates here on NewsX World coming out of that summit as we get them. There we see it. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has arrived in Paris along with French President Emmanuel Macron to discuss future security guarantees. For our next story, we move over to the Indo-Pacific, where North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is visiting China for high-level talks with President Xi Jinping. China's foreign ministry confirmed that the two leaders will hold discussions on China-North Korea relations and key regional issues. The visit highlights growing ties between the two allies as Beijing signals its readiness to work closely with Pyongyang on shared interests. Listen in to what the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman had to say on the issue.
两党两国领导人将举行会谈，就中朝关系和共同关心的问题深入交换意见。金正恩同志来华出席93纪念活动，和两党两国最高领导人举行会谈，具有重要意义。
Okay, we are now joined by our guest, Andrew K.P. Liang. He is a China strategist and he joins us live from London. Andrew, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme. Obviously, the West are turning their heads at this meeting between President Xi Jinping and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. The statement has said that they are going to discuss shared interests in the Chinese capital. What exactly are those?
Well, we've got to go back to the six-party talks of nuclear denuclearization held by the six parties, including the United States, and even China, and some European countries, including France, Germany, to broker a deal to denuclearize North Korea, and then ending up with President Trump crossing the border to shake hands with Kim Jong-un on North Korean soil. But that all came to nothing because the United States seemed to be fickle and unreliable in the sense that they always demand a total surrender on the part of North Korea, giving up all his nuclear facilities in exchange for a promise to ease economic sanctions. It's always the same hymn book. So Kim Jong-un is fed up with it, is now developing its nuclear weapons, taking a leaf out of Chairman Mao's book. Don't forget, when China was first established, China was extremely poor, is under the nuclear threat from the then USSR. But then Chairman Mao opted for the bomb in preference to growing his economy. But that's what Kim is doing, trying to, first of all, arm itself with deterrence, effective deterrence, meaning nuclear deterrence, with long-range delivery systems. Now, it has developed some sort of a bomb, but it lacks reasonably long-range delivery systems, and hence it's now cozying up to Russia, supplying soldiers on the Ukraine war in exchange for Russian technology to grow its long-range missile delivery systems. Now it's reasonably armed and is more confident than before of being able to sit at the top table. So his appearance and the military parade, in spite of the fact that North Korea is such a small country, a poor country, and a patriot, able to share the top table, is a big win for Kim Jong-un. But on the other hand, the United States is trying to contain China in the Asia-Pacific, as they're deploying assets in the so-called first island chain centered in Okinawa, a second island chain centered in Guam, and North Korea is a huge thorn on the side of the United States.
Okay, Andrew, do stay with us as we move on and stay on the topic of Beijing. China has responded to US President Donald Trump's accusations, defending its decision to invite Russia and North Korea to the World War II commemorations in the Chinese capital. A foreign ministry spokesman said the event was meant to honor history and promote peace and not target any country. This is in response to Trump's post on Truth Social, where he accused China, Russia, and North Korea of, quote, conspiring against the United States after their leaders stood together at a massive military parade. Russia also reacted with Kremlin aide Yuri Ushakov, calling Trump's claim not without irony and hoping it was a joke. Let's listen in to the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman about the issue.
Accuse the leaders of China, Russia, and North Korea of conspiring against the United States. Can you comment on that?
中国发展同任何国家的外交关系，从来不针对第三方。
Andrew, that military parade yesterday, compelling visuals of the Chinese president walking alongside two of the most sanctioned leaders in the world. Of course, Xi Jinping and China have said that this was a show of peace. However, also, of course, showing off their new military equipment and their soon to be a very powerful military that could maybe rival the United States one day. What signal do you think that China was trying to compel here? And what do you say to the critics that say that this was indeed some sort of conspiring against the United States and the West?
I think that what Beijing wants is a peaceful international environment, a reversion to the old rule-based order, and if in fact founded and led by the United States, based on commonly accepted rules, and respecting other countries' sovereignty, and perhaps even in a way lending assistance to some of the poorer nations. But that world order has now been totally upended. And it's fracturing, and sanctions are imposed left, right, and center, not only against China and Russia, as its Americans perceive existential threat, but on allies and even Americans' largest neighbor up north, Canada, and of course the transatlantic relations countries in Europe, and not least, of course, are the countries in the global south, which are facing huge challenges to their economy, to their livelihood. And what this combination of the three nations is a reaction. They're pushed together rather than pulled together. Let's not forget that Kim Jong-un is not 100% pivoting towards China. As I mentioned earlier, is pivoting towards Russia and trying to carve out its own path. But on the other hand, North Korea is heavily dependent on China for its economy. And likewise, Russia, dragged down by the Ukraine war, and is relying on China to sustain its economy in terms of energy purchases and agricultural products and so on. So the T3 countries are pushed together, and it appears to be a threat to the United States dominance, as forewarned in a way by the former foreign policy doyen Brzezinski, who was Henry Kissinger's mentor in his seminal book in 1997 called The Grand Chessboard. He did warn that the greatest threat to American dominance would be if Russia, China, and Iran are being working together against the United States. That's what's happening, but these countries are being pushed together rather than joined together out of their own volition.
Andrew K.P. Leung, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for taking the time. We now move over to the Indian subcontinent, where New Delhi has announced tax cuts on hundreds of consumer items, ranging from soaps to small cars, in a bid to increase domestic demands amid economic challenges from US tariffs. The measures come after the United States imposed 50% tariffs last month, raising fears of an economic slowdown. Indian Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman said the goods and services tax has been overhauled, simplifying the four-tier system into two slabs. The panel, headed by the minister, approved rates of 5% and 18% from earlier slabs of 5, 12, 18 and 28%. Let's listen in to what the Indian Finance Minister had to say.
Reduction from 18 or from 12 to 5%. I list out those items, all of whom have come to 5% from either 18 or from 12. Common man items such as hair oil, toilet soap, soap bars, shampoos, toothbrushes, toothpaste, bicycles, tableware, kitchenware and other household articles have all come to 5, whether they were in 18 or whether they were in 12.
We're now joined by Dr. Ajay Dua. He's a former Secretary of Commerce and senior economist, and he joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Dr. Dua, for joining us as always. These announcements today from the Finance Minister, are they enough to deal with Donald Trump's crushing tariffs on India?
Thank you very much, Thomas, for having me.
Pleasure.
The discussion between the Union Minister of Finance, Nirmala Sitharaman, and all the state finance ministers, who are, every one of them is a member of what's called the GST Council, Goods and Service Tax Council, jointly decided last evening, after deliberating over it for over a year, how to rationalize and optimize the tax which was imposed in 2017, 8 years ago, by amalgamating the central government taxes, indirect taxes, and the state government taxes. So this amalgamated unified tax, which had turned India into one uniform market, was long overdue for a review, and the exercise had begun about a year ago. It culminated yesterday when there was a consensus amongst them that we need to reduce the rates, like most of the industrialized world has it, to one rate of the tax, VAT, what is called in many countries. In India, we call it GST. Because goods are taxed by the center and the states, and services only by the center, so that these were combined. And it was decided that instead of, as you mentioned, Mr. Thomas, that instead of 4 rates, they've been reduced to 2, 5, and 18%. At 99% of the items which were at 12 and 18% have been reduced to 5%, and those items which are at 18 and 28, 90% of them have been put at 18%. So, sorry, I stand corrected, between 15 and 28, the new rate, 18% rate, 90% of the items are there. Some have moved up from 15, and most of them have come down from 28 to 18. This is going to be, this is coincidentally kind of coming at a time when Mr. Trump has levied his 50% back-breaking tariffs on India. But it had nothing to really do with his tariffs, because they were overdue, they had been announced, deliberations between the center and the states had been going on, and it's going to help out a lot because it will reduce the kind of onerous tax rates which we had in India, going up to 28%, and on certain items even 40%. Reduction in this the rates is going to help deal India with building up a higher consumption within the country. There is an estimate that the household consumption in India forms 60% of the GDP. Now, with this reduction of 2 trillion rupees, it's going to become 68%, 8% more consumption is expected, particularly of the lower category of people who have a very high propensity to consume. They save very little, so if they get 8% more money, they will spend it on. as a result of this, which would help India, incidentally tide over what Mr. Trump has done to the country by imposing a penal rate of interest of 50%, but that's a coincidence. This was long overdue, and we are hopeful that as India goes into a festive season, 2 months of various festivals in different parts of the country, and that's like Christmas for us. Most of the shopping takes place during that time, that we would see the benefits of it coming within a month and a half or two, when in September or when in October the festival season starts. That is why the government took a conscious decision to start the lower taxation regime on the 22nd of September itself, so that people are able to liquidate their stock. That's it.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Ajay Jua, for so much concise information there. Thank you very much for taking out the time and joining us. Well, that is all that we have time for today. However, we will continue to bring you more updates from around the world. Thank you.